Jambo Rafiki. I'm Elizabeth from Kasiwa82 and I hope you're doing really well. If you're new to my channel, welcome, and if you have been here before, welcome back. It's TBR Tuesday time and I'm going to be talking about my recent reads wrap up for a bunch of comics. So this particular video is going to be all about comics, so if you are into that, stay tuned. So as usual, I will talk about these in the order of least favorite to most favorite, not in the order I read them. So let's go ahead and get started. The first book I have to talk about is Menopause, a Comic Treatment. Now, as with all of the books I mentioned below, I will leave a link or description of the books and the authors and all that stuff in the description box below, so you can go take a look if you wish. And if I happen to have remembered to take a photo of the artwork in these, I will insert them as well. So, as I was saying, Menopause, a Comic Treatment is an anthology. Now, so the thing is, menopause, right? It's one of those words, it's one of those symptoms that's considered taboo. Just like when girls start first menstruating, goodness knows we can't talk about that. I don't even understand why, and to this day, there's a whole bunch of shame connected around a woman's bodily functions, which are incredibly normal. So, don't get me started. So this particular comic is doing exactly that. What it's trying to do is demystify and de-tabooize, is that a word? The concept of menopause and how we go through it, we women go through it in a variety of ways. And it starts really early for some, it starts really late for others. It's really difficult for some and not so difficult for others. And I think part of it is because there's a secrecy of silence around menopause. There isn't much to be talk about it. People don't talk about it as often. And a lot of times you have to stumble your way through on your own or find someone you happen to know who's older and you trust and can actually have an open, honest conversation with you about it. And, you know, those people sometimes tend to be few and far between, and who the heck wants to get buried and dive deep down into necessarily medical jargon? So what this particular anthology does is it pulls a variety of women and asks them in comic form to talk about their experience with menopause. I was really hoping to love it. I gave this one 2 stars, and part of the reason is I just felt all over the map. It usually happens with an anthology. You're not going to like every single artist or every single story being told. But for the most part, this was really hit or miss for me. I think there were a couple I liked, and then the rest of it, I just wasn't sure what point they were trying to bring across, especially given what this book was supposed to do. I like the representation on the page. There's a lot more diversity than you would normally find, but I wanted more, I needed more. If you happen to know of a really well done non-medical jargony book on menopause, definitely please let me know. Susan Northrup, I think her name is Susan Northrup, is an author I would recommend, by the way, if you're interested in just our women, our bodies in general. But again, I was disappointed in this one and I was really looking forward to it. Next up, I have Spy Family Volume 3. Now, this is a YA manga, and I just really have fun with this series. I've read volume 1 and 2 already prior, I think it was last year when it first came out. And I happened to see that volume 3 was out and I wanted to go pick it up. So really enjoyable. The premise of this is, again, it's a complicated, kind of confusing world. There are these 2 worlds that are kind of connected through a border. And this is essentially a spy/espionage story. So we've got this master spy called Twilight, and in order to accomplish his current mission, he needs to have a family. So he has to go find a wife and a child and create this family for himself. So not unusual trope when it comes to espionage/spy stories, but what's really fun about this one is we have Twilight, who is a spy, and a spy extraordinaire at that. And then he ends up finding, adopting, if you will, this young girl who, unbeknownst to him, is a telepath. So she can actually read people's minds. So she knows, the little girl knows pretty quickly that he's a, spy, but she doesn't understand what he's talking about, right? Because if you think about it, she's just kind of tapping into someone's mental chatter. And so for a kid who is kind of in very young, I mean, I think she's kind of like primary school or maybe grades 1, 2, 3, somewhere along those lines. She's not quite sure what the heck is going on in Twilight's head, but she knows something is up. Now, to complete and round out the story, Twilight needs to find a mother for this daughter, and he ends up finding this woman that he convinces to join the family because his daughter needs a mother. Now, unbeknownst to either one of them, the mother is an assassin. The woman is an assassin. So you've basically got an assassin, a spy, and a telepath. The little kid is trying to figure out what the heck is going on. The spy and the assassin are trying to keep their lives private and hidden from everybody else. And in order to move this assignment forward, they have to get this little girl into this prestigious boarding school and connecting to a particular person. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but it's hilarious. And in this installment, we meet the assassin's brother, who I don't want to say much about it because, again, it'll spoil what the story is and the way it unfolds. It's fun, full of hijinks, and it's just really cute. Given the fact that we have assassins, a telepath, and a spy, it's kind of a cute espionage story. Would highly recommend. I gave this one 3 stars, and again, this is YA, so, you know, they're not going to go too deep or too dark. Kind of fun. Next up, I have the graphic memoir, Fights, One Boy's Triumph Over Violence. This is by Joel Christian Gill, and it's a memoir, and it's written for middle grade readers. So this is really interesting because it's really the growing up of a young black boy as he tries to navigate his way through life with an absent father and a mother who's swamped with all the, paying the bills and stuff like that. There's a lot of dark in this novel, and this memoir, this graphic memoir, and I'm surprised because this is targeted for middle grade readers. So I think you have to be, I would say, kind of a mature middle grade reader, or these themes have to be relevant in your life. There's a lot of swearing, there's a lot of violence on the page. This kid is beaten up consistently, physically, and there's also sexual abuse that happens. Now, some of the stuff we see on the page and others we fade to black, so we don't really understand, we don't visually see what's happening, even though we kind of get a sense of what's going on. I think the art is really cute, it's kind of, and that's, I think, part of the jarring part of this graphic memoir is that you've got really cute artwork with really kind of dark subject matter, so that juxtaposition can be a little jarring at times. So just be aware of that going in. However, I think for a slightly older audience, I would think this would be kind of a good introduction into this particular story and how this child copes and how he figures out a way to navigate through a lot of violence and darkness. And what I thought was really cute was in the end of the book, or really heartwarming, is there's pictures of him as a child with his mom, as well as the life he's created for himself as an adult. And, as always, when someone's had a tough upbringing, seeing kind of a more happy adulthood, it's kind of heartwarming. So just go into it knowing that there is violence on the page, as well as, kind of off the page. And this is not an easy read. 3 stars for that one. Next up is the Lolo Woods. Now, this is part of the Hill House comics that Joe Hill, Stephen King's son, is kind of, I guess, behind the whole Hill House comics. And this is by Carmen Maria Machado. Now, I have not read Machado's other works. They've been on my list of books to read. She's got a memoir and she's got a collection of short stories. But I figured this would be a good entry point in here. Now, I liked the diversity on the page. This is not a YA comic. So again, what's happening here is we follow these 2 teenagers who are queer, and there's an event that happens in the beginning of the story, and it's kind of like they are at a movie theater, they're watching a movie, and then they wake up at the end of the movie and there's kind of missing time. They don't remember falling asleep, they don't remember what happened, although some things seem weird. I don't want to give anything more than that away because, again, I think part of the blurbs for this book gives things away that I just don't think is, I think it does a disservice if you're a reader going in. Part of what makes this story interesting is the exploration of trying to figure out what on earth is going on. So this is a small town in Pennsylvania. I know the author was kind of talking about the environmental horrors and the horrors that are inflicted on people in that particular town, in the mining town. The main characters here and the what's happening is there's stuff happening to the women in this town. These two girls see deer women, magical creatures, boys or men with no skin. It's all this weird stuff, right? It's a horror tale. Now, I will say, I did think that the story unfolds in an interesting way, especially as you begin to realize what's actually going on. But there's something missing in the story, and I don't have a good way to put my finger on what exactly is missing, but something's missing. It almost feels like the author forgot several chapters as she was putting the story together, from my perspective, okay? However, I just thought it was an interesting comic, especially if you're into horror. This is a good one to kind of, dip into. It takes almost no time to read. I gave this one 3 stars. I like the art. The art's kind of interesting in this one too. Next up, we have G. Willow Wilson's Invisible Kingdom, volumes 1 and 2, which covers issues 1 through 10. So Invisible Kingdom is kind of this interesting, the artwork in this, the colors are just fantastic. And the story is really about a found family space opera. So we are in this galaxy that has 1 star and 4 planets. And so, it's an interplanetary system in terms of people move back and forth between them. They're not all humans per se. They all kind of look, humanoid in some way, shape, or form. And the people who look more human. And so it's about the what we typically would expect from a soap opera, a space opera, is you've got these people on a ship and, they are delivering packages. And what happens in the story is that the story revolves around these 2 women. One woman is delivering these packages for a company called Lux. And I don't think the author even hides the fact that I think Amazon is a big part, kind of the company she's talking about. And the other character who comes from a planet which I would love to spend a whole set of comics on because the gender, sexuality of that particular planet is fascinating. She comes from a planet and she's decided to walk away from her family and her culture to become this nun, None, nun, which is part of the way, and it's a religious group, okay? And so again, very, thinly veiled Catholic kind of overtones there. These 2 women, the space delivery person who runs her own spaceship, and this woman who basically becomes a nun, both stumble upon something that they should not have seen, which ties Lux, this corporation, with this religious group, that they're more tightly linked than you would think. That's all I'm going to say, okay? Because then what happens next is interesting, because again, what do these women do with that information? As with anything, the moment you uncover a conspiracy, there's all kind of backlash against you personally, and we're off from there. So in the first 2 volumes, we kind of have these 2 characters discovering this particular, explosive piece of information, and then what happens when they find that, what do they do, and then all of that. It's fun. I think this is a 3-volume series, so I'm really looking forward to the 3rd volume to see how things reconcile. I'm enjoying this one. I really liked it. I gave this one 3 stars as well. Okay. And finally, the favorite of the comic series that I have here is a book called Pulp by Ed Brubaker. And again, links to all artists and colorists and stuff will be down below. I gave this one 4 stars. This is also an adult comic. It's a Western. It's a classic Western in some ways. So the color and the artwork in this one is really evocative of those of us who grew up watching Westerns and liked Westerns. So again, we're following multiple timelines. We meet this guy in 1939-ish New York City, and he's a pulp writer. He writes stories for pulp magazines. you know, the ones that they used to buy for 5 cents or whatever. And these stories are all about this particular cowboy back in the wild, wild west. And, you know, that cowboy was kind of like a Robin Hood like cowboy in that they stole from the rich and gave to the poor, that kind of stuff. And then it turns out that those two stories are very tightly linked in that the person in the past and this person writing these stories right now, I'm not going to say, but there's a connection between those two. And the other thing here is that this is 1939, so this is the rise of the Nazi movement. So we've got, you know, this pulp fiction writer writing about Westerns, and we've got the Nazi/Hitler rising in Germany and the Nazi sympathizers and fans in the US kind of juxtaposed. And so 1939 in New York. And so what happens is there's a Pinkerton agent and this writer. And I don't want to kind of say how they're related or how they're connected, because again, I think that was part of what made this story interesting, was that reveal. But they're connected, okay? And it's really fun. It's very action-oriented. In some ways, it felt very much like, you know, old Western cowboy stuff matched with Nazi stuff in New York City, kind of a very urban environment. It's an interesting juxtaposition. I just really enjoyed it. Again, a really quick read, and I highly recommend this one as well. So this one got 4 stars. This was my favorite of this particular round of comics that I read. So that's what I have for you today. I'd love to know if you've read any of these comics, and if you have, what your thoughts were on them. If you have other comics along these lines that you would either recommend or you have ideas for comics that you'd like to see me read, I'd love to know as well. Until I talk to you next time, happy reading. Bye.